us. Looks like Ashley's turned the recording on, so this will be recorded. So it will be evidence in a future. No, it'll be recorded. It'll be posted on our site and on MACo's site. So if there's something that we discussed here you want to go back and review, share it with some other colleagues that weren't able to make it, we've provided that for you. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Dan Clark. I'm the director of the MSU Extension Local Government Center. I'm usually here to make inappropriate comments and poor-tasted jokes. We are working with, in partnership with MACo to host these. We've been doing these a couple of times a month since probably late spring, early summer. And so we appreciate maybe most of you have been participating in these sessions as they've been happening. I guess some housekeeping. If you want to make a comment, you can, and I believe that actually their ability to do that on their own, we don't need to unmute them. They can do that on their own.
Correct. So you are able to mute and unmute yourself by either clicking on the mic button at the bottom of the screen or the mic little icon next to your name in the participant panel. Or if you're on the phone, it's *6.
*6, yeah. So that's how we'll use this to communicate. You can also use the chat box, the chat feature, which is on my screen. It's on the right-hand side. There's a caret there that says chat. If you don't see a space to chat, click on the caret. It'll expose the chat area for you to write a question or a comment. You can either chat to someone specifically or at a private chat, or you can chat to the whole group. So if you'd like a question to be considered by our panelists today, make sure you share that with the whole group, and then we'll both be able to see your question and hear their response. And one last announcement. This will be in the next 4 hours, will be the last, or 5 hours. Ashley Kent, who's been working with the Local Government Center for about over 6 years. Today is her last day. She is moving on to go work for the Bozeman hospital system, and we are very excited for her future experience and extremely saddened at losing her. She's been a tremendous asset. She's been tremendous help throughout the center, and I'm sure you've interacted with her. You've seen that she's been a wonderful support of both local governments, and she's been dedicated trying to find ways how to support and assist you. So I want to say thank you, Ashley, for your service. And is there anything you'd like to say?
Just that I really do appreciate the opportunity to have been able to work with you throughout the last 6 years. This is absolutely an incredible group, and I couldn't have asked for any better experience. So thank you so much. I'm excited and scared to death of my new opportunity, but I'm always sad to leave because this is kind of my home, and I have found a passion for the local government community in Montana. So it is a bittersweet goodbye for sure. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Ashley. I think there's a little icon you can put down at the bottom of your screen if you want to react by giving her clapping hands or sad crying face, or no, we're not accepting this, big thumbs down. Anyway, so thank you, Ashley, and we hope to hear from you in your new adventures and as you develop a new career. So with that, let's go ahead and turn the time over to our panelists. I think I'll turn it over to Eric, and then you can decide how you want to divvy up the responsibilities from there. But go ahead, Eric.
That's a great transition, Dan. Thanks for dropping a bomb on us just before. And I'm not going to do emojis or happy faces or anything else. We are losing the better half of the local government center at Montana State University. I'm mad.
Clearly the better half. No one's going to dispute that.
Oh, Ashley, congratulations. And you have been awesome to work with. Dan is not going to be able to tie his own darn shoes tomorrow. I mean, I am absolutely petrified about what's going to happen to the local government center, which I like. But congratulations to you, and thanks for all the work that you've done for all of us.
Thank you.
I want to start with Jason doing an update on CARES Act funding and the new round of and the final round of reimbursements, and then we're going to get into some legislative discussion today. So go ahead, Jason.
Okay. First, Ashley, thank you for all you've done, and boo. and I'm probably fired because I didn't tell Eric, but I've known for a couple days. So I guess I just owned up to that. Anyway, best of luck. Let's go CARES. Hot off the presses is the draft of the guidelines for the next submittal. They're at first glance, I mean, literally got them a half hour ago. At first glance, it looks like they're in line with what we anticipated. So I think it's worthwhile to just take a minute to go through the highlights of it. The portal will open on Monday, the 11th of January. You have until the end of the day, the 22nd, to submit. Do not miss that deadline. So opens on January 11th, which is next Monday, 3 days from now. Closes January 22nd. This is our last bite at the apple. My guidance to you is still the same related to submitting for all eligible expenses that we would have anticipated had the funding been kept in place till December 30th. Please know that they're going to reject, and they might not be really happy about having to reject some of those. But I would like to have as much of a record of what we left on the table because they changed the rules on us as we possibly can. So I'm still holding to that advice, although the guidance will not say that because that is not their advice. So through October 31st, if you have not applied, you're eligible for expenses through October 31st. If you missed the fourth cycle, you can apply from up through October 31st for the expenses that you had not asked for. If you applied in the fourth cycle, but you found expenses or incurred expenses that you didn't include in your application in the fourth cycle, which ended on October 31st, you can ask for those expenses that you missed. Pre-approvals are still going to be honored with a certification of receipt or put in use, that it's been, you certify you put it in use by December 30th, and proof of payment. If you exceeded the pre-approval amount, there's no guarantee they're going to pay any additional. So if you had a cost overrun that was above what D of A or the state indicated they would pre-approve, you may be on the hook for the difference. So hopefully nobody had any cost overruns. November 1st through December 30th guidelines. Additional public health and safety personnel costs for overtime, additional hired staff, and contracted staff. They should pay those. You're going to ask for them all, but they're going to pay additional. They should approve the additional. Other additional non-payroll items for PPE, FEMA match, enforcement of local public health orders, costs associated with that, return postage for the November general election, and again, generic technology pre-approvals are listed on here twice, given as part of our 10 million set aside that we'd agreed to. So that'll include your CARPO, your case management software approvals, and it has to be in process as of November 30th to be considered eligible. And then the last words almost on this page before they put their contact information is, this is all subject to the availability of up to the $200 million. And that's the big unknown, is at what point do we collectively hit that $200 million threshold? So get your applications in, let's see what they total. And I imagine that Eric and I and Chantel will be having discussions with the state about a shortfall and getting payment for anything that exceeds that $200 million level. But we won't have any idea what that number looks like until all of you have submitted your requests. Questions on where we're at? I looked at the spreadsheet for those of you that deal with that thing. It does not look like it has any, I didn't see any significant changes for sure. It looks pretty much the same. So hopefully that will be easy for you to maneuver.
Jason, there are a couple of questions in the chat. First one that came in was, how do we prove that it was in place by December 31st? Is there a certifying form or something?
you'll just need to write that.
Okay.
A public official needs to say, yes, it was.
Okay. And do you recommend including documentation of pre-approval, like through emails with their submissions?
It won't hurt. It might save you a phone call if they don't find it right away. If you have it handy, include it. If not, they will. If they don't have it, they will reach out. And so I would be looking for it if you don't have it handy, so that you will have it handy when they ask.
Okay.
And if you think it's something that was done verbally and they're not, or you can't find that you got it and you think I might have it or Eric might have it, reach out.
Okay. Okay. And did the spreadsheet include payroll lines?
Yes. So it starts out with EMS and law enforcement, just like detention, public health staff, same as it looks the same. So they had to leave it the same because some entities have not applied at all yet. So I know some of you were worried about them peeling out the things that they weren't going to allow from November through December. They can't do that because several of you still need to apply for past months. So you should be good.
All right. I think that catches us up in the chat.
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to unmute and ask that hasn't already been discussed? Okay, looks like we're ready to move on.
All right, let's see how this adventure goes. Again, you guys can interrupt us at any time if you have questions about CARES or anything else that pops up in your mind. Please let us know, and especially during the legislative update as I go to share my screen. Questions, comments, or concerns as we're going through some of this legislation, please just interrupt me and let us know.
If Dan can do the tech tour and you can share your screen, then I think my work is done.
That's still not an excuse for you to abandon us. All right, I'm going to start with House Bill 107. House Bill 107 is pretty lengthy, but I'm going to cut right to the chase about why this bill gives us some concern. It's an intentional amendment to the provisions in 1510-425. That is how local governments run additional mill levy elections for anything that they're requesting voter permission for additional mills for. Above this, and you can pull it up if you need to, it goes through different sections of different provisions in code about, everything from special district funding to park district funding, and puts provisions in there that references back to this 1510-425 provision. Look on line 21 on the screen, and it changes all elections for mill levies from a majority to a 2/3. 2/3 of the qualified voters, 2/3 of the people participating in mill levy elections have to approve it before we can have the authorization for voted mill levy increases. 2/3. What that means is that 34% of the population in any community can control and stop what the wishes of the majority are in an election for public safety mill levies, for recreational mill levies, parks districts, almost anything that we fund in local government that requires submission to the voters of a question on the election changes to a 2/3. I believe, will oppose this. This will be on our list of discussion for our executive committee when we meet on Monday. 2/3 requirement is, as one of our executive committee members said, we will never pass another mill levy election in the state of Montana. I want to point your attention to line 6 on the next page. And this is the additional requirements that we'd have to do for disclosure, as we're currently required to do for questions on the ballot, and its impact on a $100,000 home. This changes it so we have to do those same estimated impacts on a $100,000 home and on every increment of $100,000 homes up to the maximum amount of valuation of a home in our jurisdiction. So Carbon County will be different than Garfield County on what they disclose in those ballots, but in every increment of 100,000, we have to show what the impact would be. And then that last statement on line 8, the statement must show the taxes levied for all taxing jurisdictions to which the property is subject and be itemized by the taxing jurisdiction. Our mill levy question will be pages long now because we're going to have to show this. This is in my humble opinion, this is a bad bill for a variety of different reasons. Clearly, I think the intent is to say the sponsor is tired of a simple majority being able to raise property taxes for one-off special purposes. And so it would, I think, intentionally try and stop that from happening ever again. Any questions on this? Again, it is House Bill 107. And I encourage you all to take a look at it. And if you come to the same conclusion that we likely will come to, reach out to your elected representatives and senators and encourage them to vote no. Dan, did I interrupt you? Dan Ellison?
Eric, just one quick question. And does it not also put a 10-year sunset on a mill levy, that it has to be renewed after 10 years, every mill levy?
There's a different bill that does that.
Okay.
But hold on. I was going to get to that in a different bill. I don't know if this... Gilbert bill does that for special districts.
Okay, I've read so many in the last week that I'm mixing them up, but it seemed like there was one of those provisions in there as well. But I hope you guys are successful in getting this bill turned around.
Dan, we'll talk about McGilvery's bill, and that was the one that talks about jurisdictional wide special district funding that has an automatic sunset. Not a sunset, it discontinues special districts every 10 years, right, and then you reauthorize.
Okay, that's the one. Thank you.
Yep. Any additional comments or questions on 107? All right. This is McGilvery's bill. This is Senate Bill 77. Essentially limits the assessment growth for how assessments can be allocated in special districts to a calculation of the rate of inflation. This is another one that we'll discuss as an executive committee and decide what action we're going to take on this. In theory, it might make sense, but there are reasons why assessments vary from year to year, and counties currently hold hearings. Anybody can come to those hearings and weigh in about what the assessment should look like year after year after year. But the problems structurally with this bill would be that anything that changes a requirement to fund above the established rate of inflation that they built into the statute would require discontinuation. Essentially, you have to end and kill the special district, recreate a new special district to be able to fund what that special district's intent was to fund in place at the time. And as Dan said, the additional provisions in here, and it's in the dissolution process, the sponsor intended to try and find an easier way to dissolve these special districts by petition. For example, property tax owners assessed for 50% of the total cost of the programs can petition and kill a district. So not necessarily voters. Think of a downtown district or something like that, where your voters might not be living in the district but pay 50% of the costs. The petition process isn't that concerning other than that provision in there. The one that's most concerning is on line 21.5a. A special district that encompasses a jurisdictional area of local government must dissolve 10 years after inception of the district. The example that I'll likely use in testimony if we oppose this is a countywide public safety mill levy, for example, created under the special district and funded under the special district provisions would die every 10 years. And if you have personnel associated with special district operations or financing, it'd be really problematic to know that you're putting a loaded gun to your head every 10 years to try and kill it, reauthorize it, and restart it. There are other examples, parks districts in cities and towns that fund recreational facilities or debt service or operating costs that you might not want to have an automatic kill in place every 10 years.
Eric, how about hospital districts? Would they fall under that as well?
They likely would. This is under the generic special district provision. So, some hospital districts have been formulated under the hospital district statute, some under the general statutes. But yeah, in general, I think the intent would be to fold anything under special districts under these provisions.
What about rural fire districts?
Same answer. Sometimes yes, sometimes not. I want to talk about the intent of this. This is billings. This is my understanding is that this is a reaction to some cities and towns that have tried to shift general fund obligations off into special district financing. For example, you do a citywide parks district, and that you take what the general fund used to spend on parks district and make it a voted levy supported function, and then you free up general fund to do what you need to do. Now, we can argue the merits about whether that's bad or good. It's allowable. It's part of the reason why we have special districts. Then the voters ultimately get to weigh in on that. And with the limitations that we have in 1510-420 about your ability to provide services and meet your constituent demands with a half a rate of inflation and new growth, it is a reasonable outcome. I mean, cities, counties, and towns have been shifting or funding one-off special purpose districts so you can keep up with the constituent demands. The argument in billings, or the reason for the bill, was that a certain number of folks just didn't like that they were freeing up general fund money when they were creating jurisdictional-wide special districts. And that was the goal of this, to say that if you're going to do that, it's time limited to 10 years, and your growth on assessments can only be the rate of inflation.
Someone else asked, is that also for county weed districts and grazing districts or cemetery districts?
It would be if they're organized under the special districts chapters, yes. Yeah. Not retroactive. I guess that's a question we'll ask the legal folks when we get into testimony. I don't believe that this is intended to be retroactive. It can't affect any special districts in place right now, so it would be on all future special districts. All right.
I was just going to say a little bit of context and, why Billings has a cap in their charter.
They do
74 mills, and so they're really pushed to create these special districts. So it's kind of a unique environment that's created in Billings, and this seems to be a statewide response to a Billings issue. They could change their charter, which would change the dynamics, and this concern may go away or shift in its problem. Anyways, so just something to consider that as well.
And Chantel dropped a bunch of text into the chat box that might be useful to check out.
Yeah.
Does she want to talk about it, or should I just keep going? Too late, Chantel. I can't.
I'm here now.
Look at the text box, so you have to talk about it now.
I put in just what the special districts are, and it looks like it didn't get all of the text. So I'm going to put it back in there again.
That's a 7-11 1003 1003. Is that what you're using?
I am using 1002.
1002. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Chantel, do I have your permission to move on to my next bill?
Oh yeah, I was just helping out in the chat by letting everybody know what the special districts are.
I appreciate that. House Bill 121 is the next one I want to talk about. This is Representative Beatty's bill. I think I gave you a heads up that there were going to be likely a variety of different public health related and public health, Board of Health and Health Officer Authority bills moving forward. This is one of them, and this is one of the first ones that's been in draft for us to be looking at. I point your direction to page 2 of the bill. We'll start on line 14 with a new definition in Title 50 about what a local governing body is. I don't particularly have concerns with this, but I want you guys to think about the different forms and structures that you folks have in operating your public health functions. Some of you have city health boards, some of you have county health boards, some of you have city county health boards, some of you have multi-jurisdictional, multi-county health boards. And the definition in here is making sure that that the governing body is the elected boards that create these health boards. So it's to make sure that we'll get into subsequent sections that when some authority is contemplated, it's submitted to the governing body for review and approval. It's not necessarily problematic, but if you have a city county board of health and you have to review actions or recommendations taken by a health officer or board of health, and it has to be reviewed and approved by a county commission and a city commission, there is no guarantee in the state of Montana that those two entities will agree. And that could become problematic for things like changing a health officer's directive, modifying a health officer's directive, or enacting a health board's regulation or ordinance. So while the definition isn't troubling, the concept that it would have to be reviewed and approved by multiple jurisdictional governing bodies might make what the intent of the bill is more difficult. Under Title 52-116, the provisions that are already spelled out in statute about powers and duties of local boards of health. We get into the modifications on page 4, line 22. And this is, as I discussed before, the notion that what I had thought was going to happen was that the exercise of any extraordinary powers or authorities, especially in a pandemic, disaster declaration, or emergency declaration, would be submitted to the governing bodies for review and approval. That's not what this does. It goes a step further and says that anything related to 52-130 proposed for resolution or adoption, or proposed, has to be submitted to the local governing body for adoption and approval. And that includes all kinds of things. Fees, communicable disease control, filth, sanitation, tattooing and body piercing, institutional controls, anything that public health does. It captured all of it. So the regular, routine, mundane, boring things that frankly you want to leave up to your boards of health and allow them to make decisions about things that they do on a normal day-to-day basis have been caught in this review for approval by the governing body provision put into this bill. The meat of the bill gets on page 6, line 2. It's a directive, mandate, or order issued by a local board of health in response to a declaration of emergency and/or disaster by the governor or by principal executive officer of a political subdivision, remains in effect until the majority of the governing body moves to amend, rescind, or otherwise change the directive, mandate, or order. In a practical sense, if this were in place right now and a local board of health or a health officer issued a order or mandate, say for mask enforcement, the local governing body could repeal, rescind, change, revoke, modify those orders as long as it was under the declaration of an emergency or disaster. If you go to the sub 118 powers and duties of a local health officer, the same language you can find in the new sub 2. So if a health officer issued some order or directive that they were authorized to do, it could be amended, rescinded, changed at the direction of the local governing bodies. And so again, in that example of a city county board of health, the city could say keep it, the county could say rescind it. And I think ultimately in that situation, there'd be no action. And so things would stay status quo. MACo doesn't have a position on this bill yet. This is on our agenda for Monday as well, to talk about how involved we want to be in modifications to Title 50 and local boards of health authority and local health officers authority. But I do want you guys to keep this in mind. And I'll say it this way, outside of a pandemic, we collectively as a community generally would want to make decisions related to public health outside of the political process. This pandemic has been different and long and problematic, and I think there's going to be a knee-jerk reaction to try and take that authority back from public health professionals and saddle it on elected officials. Now, whether that's good or bad, those are policy discussions that you get to have as local government professionals and the legislature gets to have in setting this policy. If it's going to be submitted for review and approval, keep in mind what should be submitted for review and approval. Should it be everything boards of health do? Should it be extraordinary things that Board of Health do in declarations of disaster, emergency, or pandemics? That's for you guys to decide and for you to tell us as your staff how to communicate back to the legislature. It's a big question, and this is one of, I think, a number of bills that are going to come through on public health. Any questions about this one in particular? That's surprising. Get your thing out of my way. So Ashley, your little drop down makes it blocked, so I can't get to my.
So you have to wait, and it's excruciating to wait for it to pop back up. I know.
It's awful. Hold on, I'm almost there. All right, here's a simple one. Senate Bill 71, Senator Keith Regier. This is intended to modify, again, Public Health 52-120, where current law says if an officer doesn't render service to a health officer or lawful authority under the health department, the officer is guilty of a misdemeanor and can be removed from office. Very simply, it strikes the last sentence. So it still encourages and says that a local state or health officer can request a sheriff, constable, or peace officer to assist the health officer. It just removes the part that says guilty of a misdemeanor and removed from office. There are, I think, 3 different versions of this same bill that are in draft and out. I'm not sure which one gets to the starting line first, but this one's ready to go, and so I think it's going to be this one. House Bill 23, this is the treasurer's fix to the tax deed bill from last session. This came out as a committee bill, thankfully, because it gave the time and atmosphere necessary for the treasurers to work with the interim committee on reasonable fixes to the process that was created by Senate Bill 253 last year. I think it was 253. Don't quote me on that. That sort of flipped on its head the tax deed and assignment process and triggered what might have been and what likely could have been really problematic auctions for tax deed property. The system is essentially the same, and we don't have to go through this in excruciating detail. What the treasurer's focused on is making the system that was contemplated in Senate Bill 253 work. So better definitions of what delinquent would look like, insertions of time periods that made sense. So the process from failure to pay taxes on time to notice of delinquency to assignment to tax deed auction, all stacked up with the way that it was supposed to in that original bill. I consider them to be essentially cleanups when it's related to the timeframes that are better spelled out in this bill. The problematic aspect, if there is one, you can find on page 5, starting on line 1 and 2, and it's about how distribution of surplus funds would happen at the auction process. And the bankers, Small Bankers and Bankers Association, is concerned about this because it would be the banker's preference. I'm paraphrasing here, so I might have it wrong, but I have listened to them in testimony. It would be the banker's preference that the county official does the allocation of lien position. So to find out who's in first, second, third, fourth position for any debts that are out there, liens that are officially, and distribute those according to what that lien position would be. It is the county's position and the treasurer's position that we don't have the technical expertise, willingness, or ability to start allocating out how distribution of payments, excess payments might happen. We want to get it to a source. And the way that they've proposed it is that the any surplus funds get to the legal title holder of record. Liens, attachments, debts, all can be fought out in the private sector. And I totally agree and support the treasurers in this notion that we don't want to be in the business of allocating positions of liens for banks to make sure that they get the money or the attachments that they're entitled to. That so far has been the biggest problematic issue with this bill. It had its hearing Wednesday in House Tax. Representative Beard is the carrier and she's the chair of House Tax. They did executive action on this bill today and it made it out of House Tax unanimously. There was a move afoot from some private industry folks to try and insert a bunch of different provisions in this bill that deal with abandoned property. So in theory, it could fit in here, but the treasurers don't believe that it does. And they're going to, it appears they're going to resist any substantial changes to this bill that add components of it that weren't contemplated by the interim committee. If you have questions about this bill, I encourage you first to talk to your treasurers. They know this process forward and backward, and it's really, it's a detailed process, and we officially are going to support the treasurers in their slight changes to this bill.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
Is there a definition of legal title owner?
The one who, yeah, there will be in the section, but it's the one that this is at the end of the auction process. So when you acquire the property by tax deed, you become the legal title holder. So when the county issues the deed to you because you've purchased the property at auction, you get the surplus funds if there are any. And frankly, according to the treasurers, this process likely won't result in surplus funds, a significant amount of surplus funds being out there. I forgot to say, there's also likely, well, no, if you have additional questions about the details of this, please contact your treasurer. Let's go. House Bill 127, Representative Carlson's bill. I've heard a lot about this in the last couple of days. I did send it out to the Treasurers Association, and hopefully they're communicating with anybody else that might be interested in the county. Recall that partial payments for property taxes have been discussed and an issue in counties in the past. And I know, and nobody has to admit this, but I know that there are offices out there that, for the benefit of impacted property taxpayers, set up off-books partial payment collection processes for property taxes in order to avoid tax deed or assignment or to get people current. It's never been legal. I'm not an attorney, so I probably can't say that. It's never been authorized by statute, but I know it happens. This bill is trying to make that a process that's authorized by statute. I've heard great concern from a number of counties and from a number of treasurers that the format for this doesn't work. And so I'm interested in anybody's ideas or suggestions for improving it. If there's an ability for partial payments of taxes to be collected. And one of the things that I think will be discussed is to make it only applicable to back taxes and delinquent taxes. So in that grace period of a couple of years where you're delinquent, if a payment plan could be set up for impacted property owners to make partial payments on their back taxes, that might be a reasonable compromise. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chantel first, I think, who has a list that she needs to go through.
I do. But
Well, do I need to unshare?
say that again?
I'm unsharing.
Oh, okay. All right. So first, congrats, Ashley. You will be greatly missed, and I'm sure Dan is going to go crazy. Moving on to so a few legislative updates. Let's talk first about how weird the Capitol is right now. So I know it's only week 1, and it could be a whole new story next week, but it's a dead zone in that building. Usually the only people in the committee rooms are the members and the bill sponsor, with maybe someone accompanying them who asked them to bring the bill forward. And there's only been one chair sitting in the room, in the committee rooms, in the rooms that I've been in. And it's just strange to sit there and have the whole committee be in front of you and you're just sitting in a chair in the corner watching them. It's just bizarre. I've heard from multiple people now that if you can participate remotely, to please do so. People are not just milling around up there at all that I've seen, and maybe Jason has seen something else. The COVID Advisory Council met today. They might still be meeting. They had about 20 people on for public comment, and that's the group that's made up of leadership that was formed through rules to get together and figure out the COVID situation at the Capitol and what to do as it progresses. And finally, everyone probably saw in the news that we've had our first legislator diagnosed with COVID. So Representative Beatty is COVID positive, but he's asymptomatic and he got it before the legislative session. So he let everyone know so that, you could take precautions or get tested if you had been in touch with him. Any questions about that?
Chantel, how come you didn't make a comment about me being at the Capitol?
Do you have an announcement, Eric?
I'm COVID positive. I can't be at the Capitol.
Eric can't be there, and I don't know if Jason can be there or not anymore.
So I'm on self-quarantine, close contact related, and you can point towards Mr. Bryson for the blame on that. Let's hope I am not positive, because I did spend quite a lot of time in the Capitol this week.
Yeah. Okay, so just a few legislative items. House Bill 50, redistribute 911 funding to the state library. This legislation originated from the Legislative Finance Committee with the purpose of helping readiness of next gen 911 data, which would be the GIS component. It appropriates $450,000 of state 911 funds annually, straight off the top of that fund, to support the GIS data assessment and data development for the public safety answering points around the state. And that's a PSAP, and a PSAP is essentially dispatch. The allocation, like I said, comes right off the top, and that's before your quarterly distributions or the grant fund, so it doesn't hit those as hard. I do have a spreadsheet on how it hits each PSAP, each county hosting a PSAP, and I can certainly share that information with you. I'm going to look at it real quick. So for the quarterly funding reduction, it looks like our highest number for the quarterly part, this isn't the whole annual, but quarterly 8,550 roughly. And our smallest looks like $76 for West Yellowstone. So in between there, it just fluctuates. The larger PSAPs, of course, get hit harder than the smaller ones, which is to be expected. They collect more funds and they have a higher population. So this provides for that GIS component is essentially service, a software service, and then PSAPs would be able to go on and look at their data and the GIS data that's online. It'd be maintained by the state. They're going to hire one, it's for the state library. So the state library would hire 1.5 FTE to help local governments update their GIS data and provide some consulting resources to help improve the data. And that's basically the gist of it. There is a safeguard put in there that says that this money can only be used for the GIS data sets to help with Next Gen 911. And there is a reporting requirement. So the state library has to report to EDIC, the Energy and Telecommunications Interim Committee, during the interim on how the program is going. And there is a sunset of June 30th, 2030, which is 10 years. And I've suggested, we don't know if we're opposing or staying out of it or going in as a proponent, but I've suggested that they cut that back to 6 years. That's the typical time for an appropriation to sunset, and that will give them enough time to see if this program actually works. And if it doesn't, then we can go in and say, this is crap, kill it. So that's the first 911 bill. Any questions? Okay. The next one is Senate Bill 14, provide for tribal participation in 911 grant program. This bill is continued cleanup from the big 911 cleanup bill that was in 2017. And it was studied prior to that whole interim. So that came from a bill in 2015. This has been years of 911 drama with this issue. Last session, we fixed the issue with the tribal PSAPs. They weren't able to receive their quarterly distribution because that was inadvertently left out of the bill, and so their money was just sitting in an account. And we tried to figure out how they could get that money, and the only way would be to work through the counties, and that's too difficult because then they would have to submit reports to the counties, and so the money just sat there. So last session, that got taken care of. The money was released to the tribal PSAPs. It was money that they had always gotten and then had stopped with the cleanup bill in 2017. Then we inadvertently left them out of the grants part of the bill, where they could apply for the new grants that were created in 2017. So that's what this is. This bill allows them to apply for the 911 grants, and that's it. Any questions? Okay, one last bill, House Bill 49, revise recording fees to support county and state land information accounts. This increases the clerk and recorder recording fee by $1. 75 cents goes to the Montana Land Information Account, 25 cents to the county's GIS. This came out of the Legislative Finance Committee. It's being carried by Beatty. going to be a hard one to kill. The clerk and recorders are bringing forward a similar bill to increase the recording fee by $2 and push that money towards the digital account. I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called. It's for online records preservation, something to that effect. We'll see how that turns out. We have to reach out to some stakeholders and see how they feel about it before the sponsor is going to officially sign off on it. He doesn't want a lot of problems with it, and I totally get it because fee bills are just difficult right now with the pandemic and the new administration. So we'll see what happens there. We have a bunch of other bills, but I'm just going to address them as they start to pop up with you guys over time.
Chantel, could you repeat real quick what that last bill that Representative Beatty is carrying?
House
What
number
number?
49?
49.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chantel. I think for in the future, when we do this, we'll try and do, I'm going to make a promise that I probably won't fulfill. We will try and get the list of bills that we're going to talk to out in some form of agenda in advance, but also know that the way things happen up there, we're going to have them be taken off and having all kinds of new stuff that won't be on an agenda. But just so we can give you an opportunity to look at the stuff that we're likely going to talk about when we know it. And with that, I'll turn over to Jason.
1 second. On that note, we do put out our legislative update at the end of every week, and that will have all the bills that we're watching and acting on. It'll have a list of the MACo bills. It's going to have the priority bills, which are the ones we're actively involved in. And then the watch bills are ones that we are just monitoring at the moment, and those could switch to priority bills like that. But at least it gives you an idea. And to make it a little easier this time, we're going to break it out by categories. So there will be like a public safety section, there will be a pensions section, an election section, et cetera, that goes down. So you can kind of just look through and find what you need.
Yeah, and although we may change on the fly what we want to talk to you about, odds are that bill, whatever we talk about, will be on that list somewhere. It's a little bit different with you folks because we're only doing this sporadically, not every week. So we will probably reach out further in our discussions on things we see coming than we would with the executive committee where we know we're going to meet with them on a weekly basis. So on that note, I've got a few bills. They're not scheduled for hearings as yet, but I know they're coming. The first one is introduced by Senator Regier related to diverting the lodging sales tax to local governments for property tax relief. So those of you that are aware of the lodging sales tax right now, it goes to a couple of things, but the majority of it goes towards additional tourism. It funds the Montana Department of Commerce tourism program. This, in essence, diverts nearly all of that to local governments for property tax relief based on the amount of tax collections in the jurisdiction. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of lodging facilities that are in counties that are not in a municipality. So it will not impact us as positively as it might a county or a city from a tax relief perspective. I anticipate that this is going to be hard fought by the tourism folks. But in essence, what it would do is divert about $28 million, at least that's this last year's estimate of revenues, back to local government for property tax relief. So you would take it off of your mill levy, depending on how much money you got. And then if it ever is less than the year before, you have the authority to backfill. So it doesn't, if the revenues from tourism dollars go down, it doesn't impact you. You can make it up in the subsequent year through the levy. But again, this bill will put us in an interesting position. Property tax relief that doesn't impact your bottom lines is something that is attractive to us to support. But the tourism folks and the tourism industry is also important in Montana. So we will be bringing this one forward for probably a pretty lengthy discussion with our executive committee as well. Questions on that one? For those of you that attended the district meetings, you'll recall that we had a conversation about finding some dollars that would enhance the cooperative fire program and specifically provide some additional resources statewide. but some actual infrastructure in the form of a couple of helicopter units, one in Billings, one in Miles City. We've all along talked about doing some sort of an amendment to House Bill 2 or grabbing another appropriation bill and jumping on board. I had the opportunity to weigh in on a bill draft related to diverting some of what is a discretionary money that the governor has to DES programs. And as I started talking to the sponsor about it, I saw it as an opportunity to try and ride our initiative for the DNRC fire protection and cooperative agreement work into this bill. The original draft of the bill, and it's House Bill 24, sponsored by Gunderson, for those of you that are following along on the website. The original version of the bill had, well, frankly, it was written wrong. It was going to take way more money than they had intended from pots of money that they did not intend it to come from. So there was going to be a major amendment attached to it immediately. But the intent of it is to take what's left over from a $16 million allocation the governor gets that he can use at his discretion for fire suppression or firefighting throughout the years, or the biennium, excuse me. What's remaining of that at the end of the biennium, 50% would go to DES, 50% would go to the fire suppression fund. Right now, 100% of whatever's left over goes to the fire suppression fund. If the bill would have passes, that 50% that now goes to DES will be used for preparedness and mitigation projects for local jurisdictions to help you both implement those and use those dollars for federal match. Develop emergency management resources and systems, matching grants for equipment, training, and planning for local disaster. And then from a statewide perspective, wildfire mitigation and all hazard disaster mitigation at the state level. So those were going to be the uses if in fact they got their half of the leftovers. My proposal is to take $2 million off the top of that $16 million annually. The governor historically has not used all 16 million. As a matter of fact, the average is quite a lot lower than that for our initiative. And then what if there's money left over from the remaining $14 million, it would go to those two programs. There is some conversation about why would we divert money from the fire suppression fund. This really isn't diverting money from it. It isn't there to begin with. It's diverting money from a fund, a discretionary fund that the governor has, should there be money left over. And the money we want to divert immediately is going towards fire suppression and mitigation. So I would argue that we're really doing what those dollars are intended to do but on a broader scale. So stay tuned for that. We are going to get all of the stakeholders together again. DNRC wasn't at the table with DES, and it sort of is their money that they would have gotten. So they want to have some weigh in. DES, of course, doesn't want to lose their bill. We want a piece of the pie. So we have a lot of moving parts on this one. And it was actually scheduled for a hearing, and we got the sponsor to postpone. So we will bring that one forward a little bit later. Brownfields, for those of you that have regional or state or regional or local development corporations that have brownfield dollars, the state is proposing to develop their own program so that they could apply to the EPA for dollars that would be for brownfields, revolving loan fund dollars for brownfields statewide. The original sponsor of the bill was going to be Senator Akeney out of Colstrip, but it turns out it's going to have an appropriation, so he handed it off to Representative Dooling of Helena, and both of them reached out to me because of my past work with brownfields and quite frankly my not liking some of the things that the state has tried to do, and asked for my input. Here's the dilemma. We don't have every county covered by brownfields, and a brownfield is basically a contaminated site, and these are dollars so that somebody can clean that up. That's a very simplified version, but to give you an idea what we're talking about. So there's pockets in Montana that don't have coverage. So in eastern Montana, Richland County is not covered by a brownfield RLF, but the 15 counties around it are. Richland County just has not jumped in with the other counties that were done through Regional Economic Development Corps. So there's pockets. I don't think Lincoln has one. I think Valley does not have one, maybe Butte. So we have some pockets of areas that do not have access to these dollars. Their local development organizations or their regional development organizations have the ability to apply to EPA to get these dollars. So it's not that they're excluded, it's just that they either haven't applied or they haven't been successful in the applications. If the state, my fear is that the state creates its own program that covers the whole state, one, you're going to take away some of the local decision making on how RLF dollars are deployed. And the state will tell me that they're not going to step on toes and stuff, but I just know better. My experience says they're going to show up in a community and they're going to expend their dollars, and the local folks aren't going to have any idea it happened until it's already too late to change the course. So my inclination personally is to fight them on it. But if there are counties out there that really feel like they could benefit from it because they may not get one through their LDO or their regional development corporation, I need to know that. We have some language in our policies that gives me the grounds to fight it, related to taking local control away and creating competition at the state level from local initiatives. But it's not something that I really want to die on the sword for, unless we think we want to protect those areas that already have it from having a competitor in the market for those grant funds that would be the juggernaut. So I'm interested in any comments folks have on that. Radio silence. All right, one last one. Special district bill, another one. This one from Senator Kerry. It simply takes away one of the options you would have in assessing your taxpayers in a special district. And the option that they are taking away is to assess them based on the percentage of the value of that unit against the value of the taxable area. So it's triple little I in 7-11-10-24 sub 3, and it reads exactly this: each slaughter parcel of land, including the improvements on the slaughter parcel, may be assessed for that part of the cost of the special district that its taxable valuation bears to the total taxable valuation of the property of the district. So whatever percentage that house is worth in comparison to the entire taxable valuation of the district, that option for assessment will be taken away by this bill. Again, still in the works, not scheduled for hearing yet, but we'll be having a conversation about that one as well, and whether or not we weigh in. That one was
Dan, Jason,
7.
I think that these people are afraid that you're going to give them COVID if they ask you questions.
Well, I know you're gonna, and they asked you questions.
I'm just continually amazed how you three keep up with all of this stuff.
Just on a side note from Chantel's comments about the Capitol, it's a lot quieter in there. And I was on campus until Wednesday when Eric informed me of his results, and I haven't been back yet, and I won't be until I know that I'm negative or that I'm positive and then I'm quarantined. But I like that it's quiet, and what I found is instead of legislators, at least the ones that like to talk to me, instead of them blowing by with their heads down because they're super busy and they've been grabbed by 12 other lobbyists, they're actually stopping and talking to me whether I'm trying to grab them or not, and that's fantastic from my perspective. So
well, then don't get sick.
Yeah, and unfortunately on that is I had conversations with a good number of them, and those offices in the building are not very big.
Jason, you should have listened to the COVID meeting this morning. I watched it until you guys started, and you'd have thought it was a zoo in there with the amount of people running around and all that. So just the way it goes up, I guess. This is Gary.
Yeah, and I've been, we wear masks in the hallways, etc. But I have one situation where I'm a little nervous about, where I had a one-on-one meeting with a legislator in his office, and my mask may have come off for that. So I'm a little worried about that one, but hopefully I don't have it.
Dan, is this the time that you bring out the sheet cake for Ashley?
Yes, if I had one. But yeah, so I guess to wrap things up with any other questions for Eric or Jason or Chantel about either the legislative session or the reimbursement, the CARES Act reimbursement.
We had talked about doing these monthly. Is that where we landed?
Yeah. Does the group feel that a monthly check-in would work as we're going through the session? I'm sure there's other ways that MACo is going to communicate to you outside of this forum, but maybe a monthly check-in is what might work best.
Hey, I got one.
Yeah. All right. Well, good.
Dan, we have a few questions. It looks like George might have a question. We've got one in the chat, and then maybe Dan Ellison.
On the vaccine.
Yes, thanks, Ashley. Just a question for Eric or Jason. Yesterday's House local government meeting, Chair Custer talked about her House Bill 18, which regarded funding for the local government center. And she mentioned that she had that bill heard in appropriations on Wednesday, and it didn't sound like it was getting much traction there. Wondered if either Eric or Jason might have a comment on that and anything that might be done to help out.
I'll start, but I participated in that hearing and I testified in favor of the funding, and I thought the hearing went really well. It was in appropriations, and I'll tell you that there's a hard line drawn in the sand on no new money. So I think the initial response back from many of the folks on appropriations is, where's the money going to come from? And I'll turn it over to Jason, who I think talked with Representative Jones.
So yeah, to be frank, the additional, well, let's start with this. The base is still safe. It's in the base budget. So the amount of money that was in there before should still be in there. The additional dollars is what we were asking for. And, in this legislative session, if you bring something for new dollars, that it's going to be extremely difficult. And the initial reaction was pretty blunt. Don't get your hopes up sort of reaction. So I'll keep pushing, and I've got some other ideas on how we can help shore up LGC a little bit, but appropriation bills this time, unless you've got a pot of money that you're going to raid and you can get everybody to agree that you can raid it, it's going to be really hard.
So along those same lines, and I'm going to talk as if Dan and Ashley aren't here because Ashley's leaving and Dan wants to pretend like he's not here.
I don't matter.
There will be a discussion. I think Representative Jones talked to Jason about if local governments need additional funding for the local government center, take it out of your entitlement share. He's going to jump there every time we have this discussion, and that's not the solution. If that's the direction they want to go, as an organization, MACo needs to talk about how we would fund the local government center through some different mechanism. And in my mind, I think Commissioner Briggs said it best a couple years ago along these same discussions. If we're gonna pay for the engine, we should own the truck. And if we're gonna fund the local government center as our educational branch, because that's essentially what they are for us. They do our elected officials training, they coordinate these meetings, they're out there for voter reviews every 10 years, they're doing one-off trainings consistently to our members. If that's the direction we're gonna go, we should talk about that being an additional cost or a built-in cost to your membership dues to MACo to give you access to it. Don't let the state take it out of entitlement. Don't let them take it from you from the back door, because they'll control that process. If we're gonna contribute additional funding to the local government center, let's do it on conditions that you control, not the state.
Yeah, my response was no thanks.
All right, I want to make sure that George gets a chance to speak here, so let's give him the floor.
I guess, it's not so much CARES legislative, but the COVID vaccine rollout. Do you have any contacts for that? Right now, we just have our first distribution, and we haven't received any since that first distribution. And with the governor's 1B new change, definitely need to get more vaccines into this county.
Commissioner, good point. I will say, as a member of that task force, the vaccine distribution task force, it appeared to me a little naive that their formula for distribution was going to rely on the 5 big hospitals as the focal points for distribution, when geographically they don't cover the state the way that we need to. I don't know, based on vaccine distributions from the feds down to the state and the states down to the counties, if you can expect it to get any better in the near future. I don't know that that's directly related to the new governor's new prioritization on 1A. I do think it's going to be because our plan didn't recognize the large geographic area that we have and the limitations that we have in distribution. And frankly, I don't think included the county to the level that it needed to, especially with our emergency medical responders, volunteer fire, volunteer ambulance, that none of that was taken into consideration. They thought that if they just focused on the big hospitals, that would suffice. I think we will find that that's not true.
All right, and we have a couple more comments in the chat I want to make sure we touch on. On the legislative updates, is it hard for you guys at MACo to do these virtual updates more often than once a month? If not then every other week? It's very beneficial, just my thoughts. And then every 2 weeks works well for us in Webo County too. So that's about the updates. Then we have another one.
I'll say it is not difficult for us, and it is well worth the time to communicate to our members about the legislative updates. And Chantel, Chris Halling back in our office is going to transition into that role, but getting out the information the way that we have in the past through a kind of a newsletter or ledge update gives us the template to talk from. If our membership wants these on a weekly or biweekly basis, I'm happy to accommodate that. The issue will be, we'll need to lock in that schedule, pull ourselves out of the Capitol, and dedicate the time for these Zoom meetings. And I'm absolutely willing to do that. Not just because that came from Rosebud County, where our current president is, but because if our members ask, we absolutely like to talk.
Okay. So we can stay tuned for more updates on when that might look like. And then Clarice made it. Oh, go ahead. Do you have a thought on that? Okay. So Clarice said, haven't heard a word about the last reimbursement request. So do you guys have any guidance or updates on that last round, what that looks like right now, and what the county should be doing in preparation for the last request time period? I'm hearing the frenzy of typing. Somebody besides me has to unmute and talk about this.
Jason.
Sorry, I was responding to a private chat. I missed the question.
So Jason, could you give just a reminder about thanks Jim, about the last round of funding requests, the dates, what they should be doing now, what those steps are?
Yeah, so January 11th. So on Monday morning, they'll open the portal. Same process as before. Submit your spreadsheet, submit your certification from local government official signature on it, and upload all of your receipts, your payroll reports, etc. They will pay everything payroll related that was eligible before through October 31st. But our request or our suggestion is that you go ahead and ask for everything through December 30th. All of the eligible expenses that we had discussed up until they killed the program, frankly, are eligible through October 31st. So if you missed something, if you hadn't applied through that date or haven't applied at all, go through October. You should get reimbursed through October 31st. From November 1st through December 30th, it will be PPE related expenses, additional costs related to health officers. So if you had to do overtime, hire new contractors, etc., bring on new staff. If you hired folks to enforce your local health guidelines, those will be reimbursed. And then lastly, it's a race to $200 million, and we need to know when we hit that, and we will argue for more. But get yourself in there when you can and get in line. I don't have any feel for how they're going to determine what they're going to pay when they hit that magic fake number they made up.
Has anyone else not heard anything on their fourth request? Reese is asking.
I think they are still working on a few of those. Oh, and there's I meant to talk about TSEP. So the TSEP, if I didn't talk about it, the TSEP bills are up. For those of you that have applied this last time, your specific project will come up at some point. You need to talk to your engineer, make sure you know when that is, or your regional development organization or whoever wrote that application. They should be tracking that for you so that you know when you need to be ready to testify. It's generally painless, just a couple minutes from you saying why the project is important at the local level goes a long ways. We just weigh in general about the program and specifically about the bridge part of the program because that's what influences you or helps you as our members. We don't generally own water and wastewater projects, so the bridge portion of TSEP is what we advocate for. So we will do that in general, but for individual projects, you need to find out when your project will be up.
All right, I think that catches us up.
Jason,
Yes.
this is Christine Keltner from Prairie County. Are you
Hello.
going to be available the 15th?
Maybe for
I'm coming up to Helena to see Hallie, and I would like to visit with you.
if Commissioner, if I am not locked in my house, I would love to meet with you.
Okay, I'll keep in touch via text.
Jason, this is Jerry. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Did they leave any money on the table from the last administration, or did they do it all and never left any for the new administration on this CARES stuff?
I can't confirm either way.
I didn't think so, but I had to try.
Now, when I meet our new budget director, that will be not the first question out of my mouth, but one of the first questions out of my mouth.
Thank you.
Dan, you're on mute.
There we go. Are there any other questions from the group before we sign off on this town hall meeting?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you, Ashley. We wish you well.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks. And Commissioner Miskey, you'll have the Zoom option.
Bye all.
We'll let you know when the next one is scheduled.
Thanks, everyone.